Let's get some analysis now with the former International Security Advisor at Australia's Embassy in Washington, now National Security Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mark Watson. Mark, how do you reflect on those images, those tragic scenes that we see out of Kabul over the last few days?
It's quite extraordinary, Kieran. I've flown into and out of that airport on a number of occasions. And even at the height of the conflict, it was always very well protected, very orderly, for the very reason we're seeing here. It's a crucial link in an air bridge into and out of Afghanistan. And to see those images are very disturbing, and I have no doubt they will be there alongside some of the images we saw from Saigon 1975 as enduring images that reflect the end to this conflict.
20 years, the operation in total. I know many would say that the Iraq war was a damaging distraction that just really hampered any chance of success. But how do you reflect on the 2 decades?
Well, the initial mission that we had and that the coalition had was very clear-cut. John Howard was very explicit. We were going in to find and eliminate Al-Qaeda in the wake of the 9/11 attack. That was an incredibly successful operation. Within a year, it had been effectively completed and we were pulling out. But then the distraction of Iraq took America's attention to that country. Time went by, the Taliban were resurgent, and we were pulled back in after Iraq to try and impose a new order on the Taliban and on the country more broadly. And we did try to engage in building a better civil society in that part of the country that we had responsibility for.
How do you look at this threat now? Obviously, you've got this human tragedy and the humanitarian crisis in the short term. In the medium to longer term, are you worried that this becomes once again a safe haven for the likes of Al-Qaeda?
I think it's almost inevitable, Kieran. Whether Taliban and Al-Qaeda may not always see eye to eye, but it's not really a question of whether the Taliban supports Al-Qaeda. It's a question of whether they allow them to operate on Afghani territory as they did previously. There's a lot of power plays in play here in Afghanistan now. I think it's going to take some time to shake out. I think the Taliban, quite frankly, are as surprised as everybody else at how quickly this has all just come to a conclusion. And I think they're still trying to work it through. It doesn't surprise me that they're allowing the Americans to come and evacuate people. The last thing they want is to poke the Americans and prompt some kind of a violent response. I think they're quite happy to let those that can get out, but at some point they will recontrol their borders, they will shut it down, and it will be a very, very different country.
As you know, as well as anyone, given your time in Washington, D.C., many American strategic thinkers have believed that they've had far too much focus on what they call Central Command, or, the Middle East, essentially. They need to be focusing on Pacific Command and the real strategic rivalry of China. Is this part of the rebalance in a broader sense, that Biden says there's no good time to get out of Afghanistan? He said as much overnight. He needs to put his resources where the real strategic battle is.
Look, there's no doubt that this is part of a rebalance to Asia Pacific, but America and the American military are big enough to walk and chew gum at the same time. The American military commitment there at the end actually was very modest. I think something like 2,500, 3,000 troops. Normally they would have 30,000 in, say, Korea, 30,000 in Japan. It was a relatively small number, but what it did was it stiffened the resolve of the Afghan defense forces. There's been a lot of talk about the Afghans giving up, the Afghan army. People need to remember they did fight hard. They took very heavy casualties, 30, 40,000 casualties, far more than the coalition forces. But what they lost when the Americans left and when the coalition left were the enablers that they needed to do the job. Plus, to be frank, there's some people standing beside them to stiffen their resolve. So when that happened, I think, they're in a world of hurt.
Mark Watson, National Security Advisor at Bondi Partners. Thanks as always. Talk to you soon.